Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. This is Justin here. I hope you all are enjoying the holidays. I'm here in downtown Wichita Falls, and it's a Sunday right after Christmas, so obviously things are pretty calm here. Um, as if to say that it really gets that busy during other times. No, this is as you can see here, there's a decent number of buildings. Really, pretty much all of this just came up during the oil boom. There's a town called Burke Burnett, which is just maybe 15 minutes north of here, and they discovered a lot of oil there. And this was the capital of the county, so it just kind of naturally became this oil boom town. And nowadays it's just kind of a crossroads for people going in between, Oklahoma and West Texas, or Dallas and West Texas. And so it gets a lot of traffic from that. But I've been living here for the past few months after I bought a house in this area. And you might think to yourself, oh, Wichita Falls, that seems like a pretty random place to live. And I have my reasons for being here. Now, of course, if COVID wasn't going on, then I'd probably be living abroad. But speaking of, being in places that aren't particularly trendy or popular or hot, I do want to talk about that, as it's something that has been coming up, particularly in my Twitter timeline. I follow quite a few people that are in the entrepreneurship space, digital marketing space, remote work space. And the hot thing these days is to leave, say, California and come to Texas, or leave, say, New York and go to Miami. Basically, all these people are finally realizing that, oh, hey, if we can work remotely, why should we stay in these high tax, high regulation, high cost of living areas? Why should we stay living there when we could just make a quick move and drastically lower our tax burden, drastically lower our cost of living, and effectively be in a place that is up and coming, as opposed to a place that is kind of just coasting off of like brand recognition, coasting off of just historically being the place to be. And now they're facing some competition, places like San Francisco, places like LA, New York. People are kind of finally putting the puzzle pieces together and realizing that, especially in the age of remote work, there's no need to stay in these places that are so expensive. And of course, with COVID, a lot of the big perks of being in a big city just basically vanished overnight. You can't go out to restaurants as easily, you can't go out to entertainment, and so a lot of people are just finally coming to their senses in a certain sense. But I do kind of want to push back on this whole notion of, it's like, okay, what I see is a lot of people, for instance, a lot of my clients in LA, or just people in LA in general, if they're thinking about moving to Texas, they just default to Austin. Oh yeah, let's just go to Austin, why not? And of course, I will say that if you're looking for a California vibe in Texas, Austin is going to be the closest you can get to that. I went to university in Austin, and so I know the city fairly well. Although, the thing about Austin is, while it is like a cool, like, up and coming city, it was never designed to be a place that is supposed to support a huge population. The infrastructure there is not designed, it is not the infrastructure of, say, Dallas, Fort Worth, or the infrastructure of New York City or LA. It's just kind of like, it was a small college town that has become like a pretty big city. And the infrastructure is just not really keeping up with the people that are already there. So then you stack on thousands upon thousands of additional people that are moving there, fleeing California, and it's just even more of a nightmare. Like, it's not even that big of a city, and the traffic is horrendous. And I just think it's And then of course the other big thing is, oh, Miami, like let's go to Miami. I think that's more for people that are, say, on the East Coast, and they're in, say, New York City, where cost of living is high, the weather's not so good. Go to Miami, you get no, I mean, the big factor, of course, is just taxes, in the sense that, you know, California has the highest state income tax in the country. New York also has state income tax. Florida and Texas are one of a few states that don't have any income tax whatsoever. And so that's obviously a huge, you know, pull factor. But for me, it's just really interesting how, you know, it kind of took a global pandemic for a lot of people to realize the benefits of, well, hey, if I can work remotely, then I don't have to stay in a place that is treating me terribly, in terms of just getting by and getting on with life. I mean, people have effectively just been paying, you know, this premium to, you know, maybe like to have, say, good weather, to be by the beach. But the thing is, you know, you don't even have to stay in the US. It's quite interesting how a lot of people, they might get this aspect of, oh, it makes sense to go from LA to Austin, but then they don't take it a step further and go, oh, maybe I should just go from, say, like LA to Mexico, or I like cut my cost of living by a third, if not more, and I can still have like California like weather. I can still you know, live by the beach, and of course you sacrifice, you know, certain things, but it's just kind of interesting how a lot of people are willing to go a certain length, but not, well, they're just, you know, limited by borders for whatever reason in this, you know, globalized world that we're now living in. Yeah, I'm just walking around here. I mean, as you can see with a lot of the buildings here, they're kind of, it's like they had their heyday. Like I said, it was, you know, decades ago when a lot of this construction was up and coming. I think that's a farmer's market there. So one of the nicer buildings here. Got a train over there. But I kind of like how, I mean, granted, it's a holiday weekend and there's normally more traffic here, but, you know, generally speaking, it's quite relaxing, you know, to be here. Like, there's not really ever any major traffic to speak of. People are pretty easygoing here. Yeah, so on this topic of tech hubs or remote work hubs, so I've traveled all over the world, and I've been to most of the remote work hubs in the world. Like, I've been to Ho Chi Minh City, I've been to Medellin, I've been to Mexico City numerous times, and I do understand, like, you know, having, say, like a remote working hub, whereas with the remote working hub, you're basically trying to optimize for cost of living and weather and things such as that. Whereas these tech hubs, I don't know, I don't get that as much, in the sense that, you know, with remote work, you know, by its very nature, you don't have to be in any one specific place to, you know, tap into that talent or to work with those people. You know, I can, whether I'm in San Francisco or Austin or here in Wichita Falls, I can still work for people across the country and across the world. Like, that's the whole point of remote work. And so it's kind of interesting how people are always fixated on, oh, you gotta be in San Francisco if you want to make it in tech, or now we gotta move to Austin if we want to make it in tech. Yeah, I don't buy that. I don't buy that. I've built up a very successful career in tech, and obviously I've been to Austin, I've been to San Francisco, but it's not like I have to live there. In fact, I'd argue that if you're, say, a startup, or if you're, say, an independent contractor, and you're trying to break into tech, I think that if you move to some of the most expensive places in the country, now granted, you know, Austin is a lot cheaper than say San Francisco or New York, but it's still not, there's many places in the country and abroad that are way cheaper than Austin, where you get a much better bang for your buck. I feel like by positioning yourself in these places that have relatively high cost of living, I feel like you are setting yourself in a situation that's not optimal, not ideal for financial success. You know, because if anything ever goes wrong, or like, the idea is that by being there, like just by osmosis, you're gonna like get more business and you're gonna do more networking, and while that's possible, it's possible that might happen for you and you might get a lot of business just by the sake of being there. I feel like you've also got to take into consideration all the negative aspects of just by being there, that's chipping away at your financials. And maybe it's better to just try to move somewhere that's not trendy, that's not cool, that's not necessarily I mean, obviously you don't want to be in a place that's on the decline, or a place that's you know, struggling with a lot of, you know, various problems like crime or whatever. Like, you want to be in a place where you feel safe, and a place that you enjoy, and a place that you like. But I just feel like a lot of people get fixated on being in the best place or the top place. It's like that's the only place you can make it, whereas that's just simply not true. There's plenty of places that are, you know, decent or better than decent, that offer better bang for the buck, that, you know, there's more wiggle room. It's not like if you have one bad quarter that you can no longer afford your rent there. Or think about this, places where it's so cheap that you don't even have to rent. Maybe if you're coming in with a decent chunk of cash, you could just straight up buy a place as opposed to, you know, renting. There's a lot of different things to consider, for sure. But the thing is, if you're following the crowd, if you're just always going, you know, where the crowd is going, then I just say expect average results, because you're doing whatever everybody else is doing. You are, you know, you're not blazing your own trail. And at least for me, I'm always shooting for above average in everything that I do. But I mean, the big idea here is that you got to consider the pros and cons of wherever you're going to base yourself. And I'd argue that a lot of the supposed benefits, or the benefits, of being in a place like San Francisco or Austin are outweighed by all of the negative, all the negatives of being in those places in terms of the cost of living, and obviously stiff competition as well. But yeah, it's just kind of peculiar to me how people it's finally dawning on people the power of remote work, but it still hasn't quite dawned on people that you can literally be anywhere whenever it comes to remote work. And in my opinion, what you should do if you're a remote worker, if you have the ability to work remotely, then don't just try to go to the trendy spot or the hot spot. Try to go to the place that suits you best. You know, the place that suits you best in terms of taxes, in terms of cost of living, in terms of weather, all of these things. Wherever you feel like you've got the best, you know, and it's not just all about business, right? You know, if you really love the beach, then perhaps it's worth it for you to pay the high state income tax in California just to be, you know, near the beach. I'd argue there's many other great beaches around the world where you don't have to pay such high income tax. Yeah, and so I guess I should probably, you know, unpack a little bit about why I'm here in this place. Like I said, it seems kind of random to be here, but you know, again, kind of comes down to my preferences. First of all, broken tap. Oh, just looking at the business there. Well, first of all, about being here is I'm extremely close to a big city. If I ever, I'm about an hour and 45 minutes or 2 hours away from the Dallas-Fort Worth metro, which is the 4th largest metro in the US. So that's very, very close if I ever need a big city for anything. Whereas here, it's just a city of maybe 100,000 people, 125,000 people. And so it has pretty much everything I need in terms of businesses, restaurants, you know, all that stuff. But it's not big enough where there's any of those downsides of being in a place with a lot of traffic or, you know, just being crowded. I don't really like being in super crowded places. Like, I'm fascinated by those big cities, but I don't think it's I don't think big cities are the healthiest places to live, generally speaking. There's some big cities that manage to do it well, but by and large, big cities can wear you down. And yeah, so it's this place strikes a nice balance of being a fairly good size, and it's also close enough to a big city if you ever need any services of a big city. Like if you need if you want to go to a big airport for direct flight as opposed to having to make many connections, or if you need to, say, visit an embassy or to get a visa, or you need to go to a very specialized doctor, you know, whatever it may be. So that's nice. And then also I'm fairly close to my family here. I've got family like kind of in all directions from the city, and this is pretty much equidistant from all of those places. Obviously it's good tax-wise here in Texas. You know, property taxes are higher in Texas than many other states, but the thing about it is the property here is a lot cheaper. So sure, you're paying a higher percentage on you know, any property you own here, but since the property is valued much lower, you're not really paying that much in the grand scheme of things. And you know, weather-wise, it's I mean, there's some pretty significant weather extremes here. Obviously, there's tornadoes, which aren't great. That's, you know, just during like the spring season typically. But I mean, it's like a few days after Christmas, and it's like probably 70 degrees. I don't even know why I'm wearing this hoodie right now. And so there's and like I said, it's pretty quiet. You know, it's I've got a nice home office where I can really focus on my work. And so this place really has, you know, all that I need, like while I'm here in the US. And if I ever want to go, you know, do a quick trip, I'm close enough to the airport where that's not really I'm close enough to the DFW airport where that's very feasible, easy enough to do. And so but I mean, long term, like I'm here back in the US, obviously due to COVID, but long term, I'm thinking about potentially doing something where, like previous years, I took advantage of the foreign earned income exclusion, which basically all that entails is if you spend about 11 months out of the year, then you're not on the hook for like the first $108,000 of income tax. And I'm, you know, ramping up things with my business to where it's getting to the point where it makes sense to you know, seriously consider, you know, what I'm doing from a tax perspective. You know, because if you do the math, if you're making over 100,000, which you know, this year, you know, thankfully things are going well with my business, and I've managed to, you know, do over 100,000 in profit this year. But once you get to that level, then you're basically spending about, you know, $20,000 on that first $100,000 of income. And so I'm I'm hoping that you know, with the rollout of the vaccine, hopefully they're gonna reopen the land border with Mexico for reopen the land border with Mexico towards the well, just at some point by the end of 2021. And you know, hopefully travel will gradually start you know, coming back, you know, in full force, and there won't be as many restrictions, and it just won't be as dangerous, as complicated. So you know, going forward, what I think is going to happen is probably going to keep, you know, living here while COVID rages on, while it's not safe to travel. But once it becomes safe to travel, then well, the thing is, with the whole foreign earned income exclusion, if I just like move to another country, then I'm just like in the rule of thumb is if you spend like 6 months in another country, then you're a tax resident of that country, and you're on the hook for paying their taxes. So if I like just straight up move to Mexico, then and I live there full time, then I'm just going to be swapping US taxes for Mexican taxes effectively, which isn't necessarily a, you know, net positive. Certainly a, you know, positive on the cost of living front, but it's you know, kind of a wash on the tax front. But the thing is, if you can manage to like bounce around from country to country, which is what I was doing in the previous years, then you can minimize your cost of living, and you can minimize if not, yeah, you can minimize your taxes substantially. And so not sure why they were like slowing down and just like stared at me. But so what I'm thinking is I'm gonna try to get something set up where, but of course, if you're like bouncing around from country to country, that can really like eat into your productivity. Like being back home, being back in the US for a while, having my own home base, you know, having a proper work setup, it's really done wonders for my productivity. And so what I'm planning on doing is trying to establish a proper home in somewhere in Mexico, and then some other because in Mexico you can stay for up to 6 months as a tourist, or 180 days, and then establish some other home somewhere else, maybe Colombia, some other place where I can, you know, stay as a tourist for up to 6 months. But then obviously you don't go beyond that 6 months, and so I'd kind of be splitting my time between, say, Mexico and Colombia. And by doing that, like, I could spend, you know, first part of the year in Mexico, second part of the year in Colombia, and I can have, you know, a month in the US for whatever needs to be done in the US. And by doing it that way, I have a really low cost of living, and then I get that exclusion on the first 100K in income. And so it's a pretty optimal scenario. As you can see, I've really thought about a lot of this stuff, and I've been thinking it through. I mean, another option, of course, is you can get residency in some country that doesn't tax you on your global income, like Panama. But for me, I don't want to be somewhere just because it's good for me tax-wise. Like, if I don't want to be somewhere and pay zero tax if I hate being in that place, right? I've been to Panama. I'm not wild about it. I don't really like super hot, humid weather. I'd much rather be like somewhere up in the mountains, like where it's drier, a bit cooler, not cold, but cooler. But yeah, as you can see, I really thought about these things. But no, those guys on Twitter, they've got it figured out. Like, just move to Miami, bro. Just move to Austin, bro. And I mean, I'm not trying to make fun of, you know, people that think like that. Like, they're kind of starting to like get it slightly, in the sense that I shouldn't be in one of the worst places to run a business like California. But so I mean, you got to give credit where credit's due. People are slowly but surely catching on. But I mean, I've been at this for quite some time, and I've been thinking about it for quite a while, and I feel like I've got a decent game plan in my head. It's just a matter of executing it going forward. But, you know, until then, I'm more than happy to be in this place that is not so trendy, but you know, it's absolutely excellent for my financial situation in terms of the cost of living. Like, I already own a property outright here, and like I said, it's really, you know, life is not that bad here. It's pretty chill. But with all that being said, I'm sure you're tired of hearing me rambling. I'm gonna sign off. I hope you found this video useful and informative. And with all that being said, I'm gonna sign off. Take care.